All right, hello out there. Hope you're all doing well. This week we're talking about nonverbal communication, which is the focus of Chapter 6. Okay, now your textbook talks about 10 different categories for nonverbal communication, but most scholars recognize 8. So a couple of them might group together. It just seems to work better that way. For example, they've got face and eyes broken out as its own category. That seems a little weird, to me anyway, and not a lot of scholars do that. So we put it together in there underneath kinesics, which you should know from your reading is basically body language. Okay, so here are the 8 categories: artifacts, chronemics, environment, haptics, kinesics, physical appearance, proxemics, and vocalics. Okay, a lot of funny words in here. Hopefully they're not totally new to you since most of them are in the chapter. All right, let's talk first about artifacts. And basically artifacts are the way we use objects or personal accessories to express ourselves or influence how others view us. Right? This could be the clothes we wear, the accessories we have, our watch, our cell phones. This goes all the way up to your house and your car. Okay, because we're all in America, or I think all of us students are taking this class from the States. Basically, we all know that the car you drive says something about who you are. Whether you like it to or not, that's part of the American culture, right? That's probably why there are so many BMWs on the street. They're also really nice cars, but they communicate to people, I'm powerful, I'm wealthy, I'm important, things like that. All right, second on our list is chronemics, and this comes from the idea of time. And this should be somewhat familiar to you. We've talked already about monochronic and polychronic cultures that view time in their different ways. And basically the focus here is how time is used in interpersonal communication. Right? So if you have a lot of power, you can make people wait, because that might communicate to them that they're not as important as you are. Some people make people wait simply to show them that they're powerful. In the film The Big Lebowski, the Mr. Lebowski, the guy that owns the house, the millionaire, makes the dude Lebowski wait for him. And he says, I'm very busy, so what do you want? When he finally comes into his office. And we all know that that guy's not very busy at all. In fact, that's probably the only visitor he's had in weeks. But he uses chronemics to suggest that his time is more valuable and that he's more valuable than the dude. All right, next we've got environment. And environment is the ways that fixed and semi-fixed features in our surroundings affect our communication. This could be the size of your office, right? If you've got a huge office or your office is on the top floor of a building, that communicates that you're probably a pretty important person. You have a lot of power, you have a lot of authority in an industry, or at least in your corporation. If your office is small and on the bottom, or you don't have an office, or you have a cubicle, or you work out of your car, that says something different about who you are and what your role is. Right? Now, some very powerful people in companies work out of their cars because they're representing the company on the road and they travel a lot. But most people, if they've got a cubicle or they don't even have an office at all of any size, shape, or form, that communicates that they're just one of many in a company. Environment also includes furniture, lighting, and the colors in an environment, right? So if you've got really nice, expansive furniture, it says one thing. If you've got small, IKEA-style furniture in your office, it says something else, right? How well lit something is can convey that this is an environment where everybody is supposed to know things, and we're very open and encouraging of knowledge. Places that are dark and somber tend to suggest that knowledge is for the limited or for the few, or this is not a place to be noisy. This is not a place to be full of energy. So our environment communicates a lot too. You can play with that in your life and with people, right? If you're on a date or you're having somebody over for dinner that you're seeing, you might adjust the lighting and the colors and even your furniture in such a way to communicate something. All right, haptics is a very funny word, at least in my book. I don't study Latin. I think this might be a Latin root. Haptics simply means communication through touch. So how touch communicates and what it communicates. Some really interesting comments in the textbook about servers who use touch appropriately to get better tips. Pretty interesting, right? And the 4 types of touch that there are, we can break them down into 4 types. Are functional professional. This is the kind of touching that happens between a doctor or nurse and a patient. Social polite touch, a handshake, a touch on the shoulder. In a certain situation, it's sort of expected. Friendship warmth touch, and this is a touch used to convey regard, affection, or camaraderie. And here, this is where you're touching the shoulder, not given for any official reason, really, but just that's to convey that you care about the person, right? This would also include a hug and others. And then there's love intimacy touch, and this is touch that indicates deep emotional feeling, okay? And so different kinds of touch for different situations. All right, kinesics. Kinesics, a fancy word for body language. But kinesics is a good word because body language doesn't quite cover everything, right? So this kinesics talks about messages that are communicated in facial expressions, your posture, the way your body moves, the gestures you use, as well as your eye contact, right? So while our textbook interplay breaks face and eyes out separately, most people consider it part of kinesics, okay? And within kinesics, we can break out and speak more specifically of other elements people use in their kinesics, such as illustrators. Illustrators would simply be a gesture that demonstrates or emphasizes a verbal message that you have, which is different from an emblem, which our textbook talks about, right? An emblem is a gesture that symbolizes a specific verbal meaning, right? And you can actually use, with an emblem, you could use the word or the emblem, right? If you give the thumbs up signal, that means somebody okay or looks good, right? An illustrator is different. An illustrator is used to add to or to clarify something that you've said. And sometimes we'll use thumbs up, the verb, the words, and the symbol, or the emblem, rather. And in that situation, a thumbs up while you're saying, hey, right on, that's an illustrator, because you're emphasizing your verbal message. All right, regulators are gestures that are used to control the flow of communication, right? Like you'll nod, or you'll look to somebody with your eyebrows raised to say, oh, your turn to talk, right? You might clear your throat to say, hey, it's my turn to talk, right? So regulators, they just control the flow of communication. Adapters, these are often unconscious, things that we do, we might call them fidgets as well, right? So you might be twirling your hair, you might be scratching your chin, right? Any number of things, right? Basically just distractions or distractors or fidgets. And posture, we all know what posture is, right? How you hold yourself. Immediacy, it's communicating interest in something, right? You might show attentiveness or not. So are you showing immediacy or not to somebody, right? Are you looking them in the eye while they're talking? Are you leaning in or not? And then lastly is power, the power that we have to influence, the ability we have to influence or control events and people, right? By just our physical presence of power. All right, next we're looking at physical appearance, right? And like it or not, the effects of our body type, our clothing, and our hairstyle, and other physical features, the effects that these have on communication. And as we all know, they can have a lot, right? There's the idea that people that, when you go to an interview, you definitely play with this nonverbal communication code. Right? You dress in a certain way. Same thing when you go on a date. Same thing when you go to school. Right? We employ this and we communicate things about who we are based on how we dress. Right? We want to communicate certain things. I'm studious. I'm fun. I'm here to relax. I'm serious. Any number of things can be played up with the way we dress and the different artifacts that we use. Right? Now, physical appearance includes artifacts, but it's distinct from it. Right? All right. Next, we have proxemics, and proxemics, you might recognize the root in there, prox, like for proximity, or approximate, meaning closeness. And this proxemics is looking at the physical distance between communicators and the message that that sends. As you know from our textbook, Edward Hall discussed 4 categories of space. Intimate space, which is 0 to 18 inches of space between people. Personal space, which is 18 inches to 4 feet. Social space from 4 feet to 12 feet. And then public space from 12 feet out. Now these are all pretty much North American categories, right? They exist in all cultures, but in all cultures they're a little bit different, right? So an intimate space, no matter what culture you are, this is where the people that you're very close to will be, right? Your spouse, significant other, family members, right? Personal space, the zone where that your friends interact with you in, um, and typically your closer friends. And social space, this is where you have acquaintances, the distance between acquaintances, right? People that you just met, friends of friends, things like that. In public space, this is the idea when you're presenting to a group of people. They typically won't get closer than 12 feet to you. Okay. Now, also within the idea of proxemics is the idea of territoriality, which the textbook breaks out separately. And territoriality is a nonverbal behavior of claiming and defining physical space. Now, being a teacher, I see territoriality play out all the time in my classrooms in terms of where students sit. You know that student seat, or certain students take up a lot of space and they take up a lot of territory. So I know that studies show that males tend to take up more personal space and have more territory that they claim than do females. Not true in all cultures, but definitely true in my experience for North American males. I know that when I sit down in a lecture, if I'm going to a lecture or somewhere, I typically take up the seat next to me too for my bag or whatever. And when I sit down, I really spread out. I cross my legs, open my arms up. And that's my way of taking up space. And I didn't used to not think about it, but that communicates that this is my territory, and it might communicate that I feel I deserve all this space, right? All right, next we got vocalics, also known as paralanguage. And your book spends quite a bit of time talking about this, and this is what some people think of as nonverbal communication, just this part, right? But this is only one component of it, obviously, and it has to deal with vocal characteristics such as your volume, your pitch, your rate of speaking, whether that's fast or slow, your voice quality, and vocalized sounds, as well as silence, and how all of these affect communication. And basically, vocalics looks at four characteristics. The voice has four characteristics: loudness, that's your volume, your pitch, high or low, speech rate, the rate at which you speak, and then tone. And tone's a little bit tricky. One text that I use defines it as a combination of resonance, which is in your chest or in your nasal cavity, like I could talk like this, or I could talk like this, right? That's my tone changing. That's in my chest, the first one, and the other one's in my nasal cavity. And breathiness, how slowly and how breathily you speak, right? And those convey totally different things, right? Think of Marilyn Monroe's tone. She's a very breathy speaker. And then compare her, say, to a politician, right? They convey totally different things with their tone, and also with their other components, their loudness, their pitch, and how fast they speak. All right, last thing I want to talk about here is basically there are four principles for responsible nonverbal conduct, right? We talk a lot about in this class how it's not only just learning about interpersonal communication, it's learning how to do it better. And here are some pretty good guidelines for effective nonverbal communication, right? Big issue is that your nonverbals speak louder than your verbals, right? If your significant other tells you that he loves you, well, it's all about how he tells you, right? I love you versus, oh, I love you. And there are much better ways to say it too. And how they say it, how their body says it, right? It speaks a lot louder than the words, right? So they may say the words that you're hoping to hear, but it may not mean what you want it to because of their nonverbals. Second point is that nonverbal effectiveness is tied to culture. Right? You've got to be aware that different cultures have different nonverbal communication codes, right? Different meanings. And so being sensitive to that and trying to understand those, right? So when you travel abroad, any of you have already traveled, I know we've got some military students, you understand this very well probably. Right? So you don't jump to conclusions. You've got to figure out what nonverbal codes mean in different cultures. It's also important in nonverbal communication to be sensitive to the demands of different interpersonal situations, right? When to sit close to somebody, when to give them their space, when to pat them on the shoulder, when to give them a hug, when not to, right? Going back to nonverbal communication and restaurant servers, right? The idea of direct eye contact in a restaurant tends to lead to higher tips, which is interesting, right? But direct eye contact when you're speaking to a faculty member who's maybe who's calling you in to discipline you, that might not be the best time to look them directly in the eye. You might look down to show deference, right? Hopefully that you're never getting disciplined by a faculty member, but maybe your boss or something, right? Imagine your boss calls you into your office and it turns out that he's reprimanding you for something. you're probably not going to have direct eye contact. It's not going to benefit you there. Then the fourth principle is that verbals and nonverbals communication flow with one another. Right? So they go hand in hand. So it's a dance. You're using both to communicate the ideal message. All right, well, that's it for this week. Some of these concepts will be included on your quiz, so good luck with that, and we'll talk to you soon.